there, this is Alvin, and welcome to the Kickstart Commerce podcast, where we share search, marketing, and domain investing strategies to help grow your business. In today's episode, our guest is none other than Kassey Lee, a global domain strategist and investor and founder of grandseeds.com, as well as a contributing writer for domainnamewire.com. Today, Kassey and I discuss how he got his start in domain investing, domain buying and selling trends in the Chinese domain market, the best tools to use, as well as the sources to learn about the buying and selling of domains in the Chinese domain market, and last but not least, how to find domain buyers and end users in China. So with that, Kassey, welcome and thank you for making time to join us today.
Hi, Alvin. Thank you for your invitation.
Yeah, certainly. So to get things kicked off here, Kassey, why don't you share with the listeners a bit about yourself, who you are, your professional and personal background?
Sure. My name is Kassey Lee, and I was born in Hong Kong. After I graduated from college, I started my world trip. I joined a German company and was sent to Taiwan. Then I got a scholarship and came to the States. Spent 2 years, I got my master's degree. Then I move on. I got a job in Tokyo, and I met my wife, got married, and had honeymoon down in New Zealand. And boy, I mean, what a lovely, beautiful country. So we moved, and now we live in Auckland, New Zealand, and my main work is translation, and domain investing is my hobby. But, starting from December last year, I have been writing for Domain Name Wire on the Chinese domain market.
Nice. So then I guess now, do you consider yourself a domain investor, developer, or both?
I'm more or less part-time domainer now, but I do spend a lot of time in domain investing.
Gotcha. So then how many domains do you own? What size portfolio do you have?
Roughly close to 400 now. I'm actually building up my portfolio slowly.
Now are most of those primarily .com or?
Yes.
Okay. So no new extensions, no new GTLDs or anything like that.
But I do have another old extension called dotmobi.
Oh my goodness. How'd you get involved with that?
Well, in 2010, I went to see a friend, and he was showing me what he was doing. And I was actually quite shocked because he had some 2,000 domains. And so I started doing some research on the internet, and just by chance, I came across a domain forum called mobility.mobi. And I really, really loved that idea. So I started investing in .mobi very seriously. But now my focus has changed. And my new playground is the .com garbage dump. You know what I mean.
So you cut your teeth then in terms of getting started with .mobi. Now, what lessons, I guess, did you learn from those early investing days?
Well, after building up to owning some 500 to 600 .mobi domains, I learned a very important lesson. That is, .com is king, and .com is deep-rooted in the minds of consumers across the world. So do not fight the trend. Ride the trend. And that helped me greatly when the new extensions, the more than 1,000 extensions were introduced. I did not touch any one of them.
He's like, no go. I've been down that road before.
No, I got burned one time. That's good enough.
Wow. So do you still own, I guess you do still own a few Mobis or no?
I do. I still have several, less than 10, to remind me, how important it is to ride a trend and not to fight the trend.
He keeps them there as reminders.
I have some excellent .mobi, like auto loan. How about that? Auto loan .mobi.
Yeah.
nobody is knocking at my door.
Yeah, and so for listeners, in terms of if you're wondering like what dotmobi was, I mean, so at the time we didn't have mobile friendly websites, or that was just coming into, or rather, mobile websites and websites were two different things. So you had a desktop website, and then mobile websites came out, and people started using, or it was thought that hey, there were going to be, I guess, this longevity in being able to have companies that had two websites, a desktop version and then a mobile. Obviously, technology passed, tools, software, everything got better to where now you have just responsive, mobile friendly websites. You don't need two different domain names per se. And so dotmobi kind of died along, well, not even kind of died, it did die along the way. Now, that's not to say that there weren't successful companies or websites using dotmobi, or that there weren't sales to be had there, but yeah, it pales in comparison when you're speaking into .com. And so so Kassey, then
But
in
regards,
regards,
back in 2010, it was a perfect story, right?
Right.
It was,
Sure.
the whole world was shifting to mobile phone, and it's for mobile phone is backed by all the major players like Google, Microsoft, and Nokia.
Right.
It's all perfect story. So I bought the story. I bought in, and it didn't work out. The story is only a story.
Exactly. Well, and then I think some companies, if I remember, because they would have like their brand name .com, and then for some companies they just built on a different directory, like /m would be their mobile site, or sometimes they would do like m.brandname.com, and that would be their site. So they didn't, they just skirted going the Mobi direction all the way. Although there are, as in everything, there are early adopters who adopted, and some people did well, but a lot of people lost their shirts.
Yep. But I did learn a very good lesson. That's very helpful.
So then, how do you invest today?
Like I mentioned to you, I'm more like a treasure hunter. I go to the garbage dump every day, aka a GoDaddy closeout. So what I do is I sift through some 5,000 domains and try to find one or two domains that may be worth something. But most of the days I come home with nothing. But
when you speak like GoDaddy,
yeah.
So when you say GoDaddy closeouts, because I want to make sure, because I know like you and I, we know what GoDaddy closeouts are, but like what, to the person that's coming into the industry and they're going, hey, wait, what, they're seeing expired auctions with bids, but what's the difference between the closeouts and I guess just a regular old domain auction?
Closeout domains are those that nobody wants. So that means there's no bid at all, 0 bid. And so once it's passed through the closeout, it starts with a price of $11, and then we drops every day until $5. And if nobody picks it up, that means it's going to be, drop. So that's how it goes through.
Interesting. So if nobody then is picking this up, I mean, I would assume that those are invaluable. Or you're likely, or rather, I would assume that there's not much value, rather, if they're passing through auction, no bid, and then going to reverse auction. I would just say, I'd kind of throw up my hands and go, hey, there's no value there. Well, why even invest in those?
But what I do is I watch both. I pick up some domains from the $11 group. During my research, if I find a domain that's interesting, it's already maybe just one user, is a generic name, they're probably just one user somewhere in the world, but not, worth a lot. So sometime I may come back and wait for it to drop, and I'm just got it from $8 instead of paying $20.
Wow. And so then how do you value those types of names? I mean, in terms of being able to, because like I said, to me, if it goes in the closeout, it probably has no value, but I guess apparently that's not the case here. And so how do you basically determine which domains have value, which domains don't?
Well, usually my way is quite simple. I just ask the question, is the domain can be used by someone in the world? So that's the main theme of my research. So I use tools to try to find out if the term is already used preferably by some businesses in the world, and or even people already a company with similar names or different extension. And so that's the only criteria that I use.
So then, I mean, do you use tools? Because I know some people I've heard, they use like SEM Rush, or some people use expireddomains.net. Others use Google Trends or search engines, or in some cases, I've even heard of people using Siri and other voice assistants. And I've not gotten into that, but like you just have a lot of different tools that are used. So do you use any of those that I mentioned, or no?
Well, I'm a simple man, so my focus is always end users. Is this something that can be used or is already used by some companies somewhere in the world? So my focus is using tools to try to dig out dig out the end user.
Now, do you use NameBio any? Because I know sometimes, like for instance, I purchase closeouts as well, but sometimes I'm looking if it's based on a keyword. I go and look and go, how many sales have happened with this keyword using NameBio? I mean, is that something that you do as well, or?
Yes, I do. I subscribe. I'm a loyal subscriber of NameBio, and I like it very much. And Michael Summers is a great guy and very, very good service. So what I do is every day, I download the sales data and build up my own database, quite a large database. And based on the database, I build up my own hit list of popular keywords. And so I use that one to filter out, because looking at some 5,000 domains is just impossible manually.
Right.
So I use the build up my dynamic list to screen out most of the domains, leaving, probably every day I would look at manually around 300 to 400 domains, which I actually scan visually. And then I look at the domain, I look at each one and say, does it make sense? If it makes sense, I would send it to .db, a great service, and also Google Search. I mean, Google Search is a very powerful tool. So I use mainly these two tools to help me identify existing or potential end users.
So interesting. So then you identify the domain, let's say you purchase it. So then what is your next step? Do you typically go to and list it on marketplaces, or are you, do you do any outbound, or is it more so just kind of, hey, I'm only inbound, or is it a mix of both?
Now, I'm actually still experimenting, because I became very serious only a year ago, last year.
Okay.
And I built up my own system and just try. So what I have been doing is once I grab the domain, as soon as it comes into my account, I just list it at Afternic.
Okay.
And immediately is available on, in the registration path of GoDaddy. And sometimes I use my LinkedIn to just send a message to potential buyers, say, hey, this is available in GoDaddy.
Oh, really?
I don't even mention that I own the domain. I just let, hey, this domain is available at GoDaddy. So if they know right away, because if they're already using similar domains, they can easily understand the value of that exact match.
Interesting. I've never even thought about that from the LinkedIn approach before, but that's pretty clever.
But I'm actually still experimenting. I've sold some domains, but I'm still trying to see the different ways. Like LinkedIn, right. I use one. It looks like it worked, but the sample is still too small, so I cannot.
Gotcha. So since coming in, then how many sales would you, coming into domain investing, into the industry itself, how many sales would you or have you completed or transacted?
Now, I started last year, and I made about, I think, 6. I sold 6 around, the 25, mostly less than $3,000.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is pretty good. And then in terms,
it's a break even, make a small profit.
Right. And now are those, I guess the ones that you sold, were those ones that you either hand raised or were those all closeouts or were they a combination of like, hey, I paid $75 for this in expired auction or how do those categorize in terms of cost?
Well, I'm a junkie, so I've never paid for any domain more than $20. I'm sorry.
Oh goodness. He's like, nope, call me the closeout king. That's where I
Yeah.
will remain.
That's why I always say, the garbage dump. I always spend my time at the garbage dump because to me, right now, it's actually more fun playing the game than making a big profit.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And just knowing, because I think it was in Paul Nix in his NamesCon, I think he did like a presentation of just about sweet spot domain investing, and he was saying on average it takes something like a whole time of like 400. I think he said 400 days on average before a given domain between like $50 to $75 sells for anywhere between $2,500 to $3,500. So
Mhm.
it's kind of like that certainly aligns with what you're doing, albeit I just find it interesting that you're specifically focused in on the closeouts. And basically finding those. Now you don't do any development though, right?
Not really, not really.
And not
You
really
know,
looking
I
to get into that lane either, I don't think, from the
No,
sounds of it.
I know how to build a website, but really not a professional.
Ah,
The website, my own blogs, my own site, I build it myself, but I'm not really that good.
right. Now, see, here's where I start to. There's a bit of envy that creeps into my heart, if you will. That when I'm interviewing someone like you, I go, man, Kassey has a leg up on me when it's considering your background in terms of what you do for daily living in terms of translations and
Mhm,
then just in terms of ethnicity as well as just the places you've lived and traveled to,
mhm.
so you are quite the cultured person here, and so I go, man, you've got a leg up on me. And so how do you use that in terms of domain investing, or do you use it?
Well, it's very helpful when I'm researching Chinese companies.
Ah.
I mean, obviously, and in my writing, because I just enjoy doing research and doing writing, and the language, the Chinese language, is definitely very helpful. The English language that I learned definitely is very helpful.
Hmm. Gotcha. And so, I mean, in terms of the Chinese market, like I know that back in 2015, there was just a massive explosion in terms of four letter or chip
Mhm.
.com domains. And so, some say the Chinese market had, topped out in 2015, 2016. So, is this true?
I don't think so. I mean, I really think it's more like a preview to what is going to come, something more
Mm,
exciting that's coming, because for two major reasons. Number one, if you look at the real genuine demand, there's still massive potential demand for domains in China. Just look at two numbers. There's about 90 million companies in China, but less than 5% of them have a website.
wow.
So that tells you. And we know eventually they all need to have one domain.
Yeah.
So that alone will create just huge demand for their domain. And on top of that, you need to understand that we Chinese, we love money, we love speculation. So when the economy is good, when there's some kind of new idea, a new investment theme, like what we saw back in 2015, someone came with the ideas called chips.
Right.
I mean, to be honest, I do not understand chips myself. But anyway, people just bought in, and that created a bubble. And so because of that cultural element, I'm very, very sure along the way that someone will come up with a new idea, a new investment theme, and then we'll ride, we'll get on the ride.
Hmm.
Oh,
And so then I guess so the question there is then, so with only 5% of the companies on, like it makes me think about and ask the question of, wouldn't most Chinese company, wouldn't they likely prefer their own ccTLD, which is like .cn over a .com?
It's interesting. Probably China is the only one in the world where we also believe, like the Americans, that .com is king. So the first choice is always .com. So
that is interesting.
I have not seen any other country. Our neighboring country like Japan, is all their country extension first. .com is considered, but China is different.
And so why is that? Why, I guess, the preference for .com over .cn?
Well, recently I looked at .us. I thought, it's quite similar. .cn and .us is quite similar. .cn is much better than, has done much better than .us in terms of recognition, and they actually face a very similar problem, because you remember when .us came out, it was difficult to get .us.
Right.
It's got a lot of dots, right? You cannot say, I want apple.us. No. Where are you located? You're located in San Francisco, right? So you will say something like apple.san Francisco, and this is .ca.us, something like that, right? And similar thing happened in China. It was very difficult in the early days to get a .cn domain, because that you have to fill out forms, and they decided to give you several dots, and then it was expensive. But on the other hand, .com was easy, no identification to prove, no form to fill in. You could just go to GoDaddy and just pay the money, and you got a .com. So that's one reason. .com was easier, cheaper to get than .cn. And another one is a lot of the early startup founders, they came back from America, or they've been to America, and they knew the .com. So that also helped too.
Okay. Gotcha.
Like when you look at Alibaba, right? Alibaba, Jack Ma went to America, and he thought of the name when he was touring America. He decided, Alibaba is a good name. So he bought Alibaba. I think he paid $100,000 to get Alibaba.com. So
interesting.
A lot of startup founders actually they came back from America. So .com, they love .com.
And so really it's the top companies then in China that are actually that kind of drove the popularity based on likely interactions, I guess, with Western culture.
Mm-hmm. And so after a while, it became sort of like a norm in China. If you're good, you get .com first. And if you can get it, you go for the second choice is .cn. Yeah. Because interesting, recently I actually asked a friend in Beijing. He's a serial entrepreneur. He started many companies. And I asked him, hey, what do you think? What has changed on the preference for .cn? He said it's still the same. The mainstream is .com, he said. And we don't consider CN unless we cannot get .com. That's what he told me.
Interesting.
So now, I don't think it's going to change for quite a while, unless there's a government intervention. I don't think it's going to change.
And that's what I was going to ask. Like, do you see or foresee, like, hey, government intervention coming in to say, hey, no, we're going to try to, because I start thinking about, like, there may come a time in a day where countries just go, we're going to build our own internet.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody that's going to be on this internet, you have to have a ccTLD that matches. Like, do you see something like that possibly happening, or no?
It could. You look at Russia, they're actually building their own intranet. And China, you look at the firewall. So it could happen. If they want to actually isolate to protect their own internet infrastructure, they may actually prefer the country extension, because with the country extension, they have 100% control. And .com is outside the country.
Right.
So, but currently there's no sign that, .com is not favored, but it could.
So outside of .com or .cn, are there other extensions that are popular? in the Chinese domain market?
Well, if you look at the registration number, it's quite surprising because now we look at registration number. You have .cn with 21 million registration, .com 30 million, and then the next one, the third one, is actually .icu with 3.6 million. But I haven't seen much impact of the ICU in actual use in the corporate world in China. And this is actually reinforced by the survey by the organization called CNNIC in China. They've been doing the survey of the domain landscape since 1998, but they have not included .icu in the survey. So that suggests that .icu has really not much impact to the real world.
Right. And so it makes me ask the question it's a couple of things. Possibly it could be that .icu is nothing but more than promotional names, meaning, the price was lowered to where it was probably pennies on the dollar, if you will, and you got people involved, or it's just being used truly as an investment. Because like you said, I mean, you're not really seeing much usage at the corporate level. So I'm kind of like, it falls into one of those three camps, if not two of those.
Well, I'm to be honest, I'm actually quite puzzled. How
right.
Because .icu, I don't think most people understand .icu means ICU. And so I actually could not explain why it's so popular, except for the fact that the price has been very low. I just think there's a lot of promotions, and probably just for speculation. And when it comes to speculation, anything goes.
Gotcha. And so, I mean, I imagine it's the same thing then with the new GTLDs, that you're probably not seeing too many of those take off either.
Yeah, I mean, actually, you also see .top, .xy, you see very popular, double quote, popular in terms of the numbers. But I haven't seen a real impact of them to the corporate world in China.
Interesting. So then, in terms of the impact then on the domain market, so, much like, obviously there's a U.S. market here, and I start thinking about, the stock market, real estate market, and likely is the same there in China. What roles do the Chinese stock market as well as the real estate market play in the Chinese domain market, or do they even have an impact on it?
I haven't read any serious study of their relationship. But generally speaking, like I mentioned to you earlier, we Chinese was just love money speculation. So when the economy is good, we invest in a lot of different types of assets, such as stocks, real estate, new ideas like Bitcoin, and also domains. So my speculation is that it's more about the economy. When the economy is good, people have confidence and they invest in domain as well.
Got it. So then, kind of, I guess, even then, with relatively slight impact, then I look and go, then, where do you see opportunities, in the Chinese domain market?
I see one area which I think is very underappreciated, and that's the English-based domains.
Really?
Used by Chinese companies. And I think when you talk about selling domains to China, a lot of people will say, hey, let's have Pinyin, right? But actually what I've been seeing in China is that there's a lot of more and more company using English-based domains, such as, 10 cent, is grammatically incorrect, it's 10 cent, no S, .com. You have like babytree.com, very simple English words, but it is a big, I think probably the largest parenting platform in China, but a very simple name, babytree.com. Or the most valuable AI startup in the world called sensetime.com, sensetime.com, very simple. And also one more, just the VIPkit.com, I don't know if you've heard of it. It is a very interesting platform connecting the teachers in America with children in China so that they can learn English. It's a more a conversation platform. and the name is VIPkit.com. And it's their brand too, no Chinese brand. Isn't it amazing? No Chinese brand.
That well, and then it's what's funny about that is obviously it's an English based domain, but then the service itself is teaching toddlers English.
Yep.
Or keep teaching grade school children English, which is kind of reinforcing that the generations to come are likely. I mean, they're probably Chinese based domains that we look at and say, hey, they're probably in use, but likely is the case with English being taught. Likely is the case this next generation will probably be more apt to use an English-based.com to launch their company.
Yeah, because I think most, I would say the average Chinese, we actually understand English, simple English word. There's no problem. So, it would be fine to use English-based domain because the whole environment is, the government is actually encouraging a lot of Chinese companies to go global, to go out. And, English being the global language and .com being the global extension. So that means English-based.com, become a very natural choice.
Well, that's interesting in and of itself. So, I mean, in terms of, because we talk about there's English domains, and I think you mentioned Pinyin. So, what types of domains, in terms of the Chinese market itself? Obviously, there's Pinyin, there are numerics. So, kind of help us get a good grasp of understanding what those are and how they even, I guess, attain their value.
Well, you can look at first the end user area. For end user, naturally the extension .com and .cn. And then you just on the names, like you already mentioned, Pinyin is fine. It's very popular in China. Acronym like up to 4L would be fine. Okay. And numeric up to 4N, that's popular too. And also, like what I said before, simple English-based word, that would be fine. But there's another area that's the speculated part. And you can have longer numeric, 5, 6, 7, some cells. And I think anything can go as long as we have an investment theme. So someone need to come up with a new investment theme, and then anything can go.
Interesting. So then, I mean, so it's interesting that you say that because of folks are coming up with new investment themes. But then when I hear that, it makes me actually ask the question like, well, who is leading this? Like, who are the top domain investors in the China market?
As far as I know, like Mike Tsai, he's considered the domain king of China. He's very good because he started during the .com crash. And the next one, but he's not very active in the domain space right now. I think he's more like an angel investor. He's more into the business side. And the next one I can think of is Mr. Dai, is a DI, Mr. Dai. And he's considered the one who owns the most 2L.com in the world. And as far as I understand, he owns at least 16 LL.com, such as JB.com or KR.com. Very, very good, domains. Wow. And he's still very, very active.
And is he active only around a certain subset or segment of the domain market, or is he, kind of all over the place?
I understand he's mostly into .com and very, very short .com.
So probably no 2-word then, I would imagine.
You mostly, as I've read, it's a LL and LL3L.com.
Gotcha.
They call it. Very short domain. Chinese folks like a very short domain. Yeah, I don't know why. We just like short.
So then kind of circling back around. So, obviously we hear the phrase, I kid you not, you probably in the domain industry, even the listeners, they probably run across articles and Pinyin. What is Pinyin and where did it come from?
Well, actually, Pinyin could be traced all the way back to 1600.
Really?
When the missionaries came to China, they needed a way to learn to speak Chinese. And so they came up with a way to use alphabets to represent Chinese characters. And so that's how it got started. But later on, the different versions were developed. And in 1950s, the Chinese government kind of just consolidated the different versions and came up with a new modern Pinyin system. So they introduced the Pinyin into elementary school to help the children pronounce Chinese characters. So it's been used ever since. But now you're in the domain space. Pinyin is actually very important because a lot of domains are based on Pinyin, such as Baidu.com, even Alibaba.com. Alibaba is also a Pinyin, it's a 4-pin domain.com. So there's even Huawei or Huawei.com, Xiaomi.com, all these are Pinyin.com. So Pinyin is very important.
So then, I mean, what are the pros and cons? If I'm looking and saying, should I get involved in investing in Pinyin, or is it like, what are the pros and cons of getting, starting to go down that path?
Well, I can tell you what I do. I do not own any Pinyin domains.
Oh, wow.
Because I like to sell my domains to the whole world, including China, but not China alone. That's why I don't own any Pinyin domains.
So then what kind of domains, I guess, can be sold? Obviously, we said English, but then what kind of domains, I guess, have you seen sold into the Chinese market, and who are those end buyers?
Oh, like what I said before, Pinyin, English, short acronym numeric domains, all these, .com, .cn.
Gotcha. So then, are you seeing a large number, or have you seen a large number of companies in terms of data upgrading their domains, in the Chinese domain market, in terms of going like from a .cn or whatever extension to a .com?
Well, I found that part actually very interesting. When I read stories, I always want to see why companies in China acquire a certain domain. And over the years, I find that there are basically 4 reasons why they upgrade their domains. Number one is for brand matching purpose. And a good example is the largest drone maker in the world, DJI. They used to run a business from a DJI-innovations.com. Then they spent some $300,000 to upgrade to simply DJI.com, which is now brand matching, right? And another one is going global. A good example is Xiaomi. I don't know how many of you can spell Xiaomi.
I can't.
How do you spell Xiaomi?
I try to sound it out. It'd be SHOWME.
No. It's XIAO and MI. It's a 2-pin. And so, a few years ago, they invest $3.6 million to acquire the shorter one. MI.me. They just have the me, mi.com, which is much, much easier to remember, right? So there's a reason. They already own the brand matching domain Xiaomi.com, but it's just too difficult. So I think my speculation is they will eventually just rebrand to simply me, me. So that's the second reason. The third reason is actually switching extension. And a good example is the bicycle sharing startup OFO. They started with OFO.SO. Want to guess what extension SO is represent?
SO. Nothing comes to mind.
Well, it's a country extension of Somali, and they have nothing to do with Somali. Anyway, they acquired OFO.com for $1 million for the upgrade.
Wow.
And the last reason is just, this is also very interesting. Some companies in China like to go short for the sake of being short. So a good example is Jingdong.com. Jingdong is actually the third largest internet company in the world. According to Wikipedia, it's the third largest, Jingdong.
Right.
But I don't know how many of you have heard of it.
I've not.
Right? Because we know outside China as JD.com, right? They own the brand matching Jingdong.com, which I think is quite decent. You should be able to say Jingdong in English. But anyway, they just went for JD.com for $5 million.
Wow.
So it's not really critical, but they did invest a lot of money for the shorter acronym. So acronym in China is very, very important.
So acronyms are important, but probably even what's more important is for domain investors to find these these end users. And so, I look and go, how does one go about finding end users in China, especially if you're not of Chinese descent or background?
Now, suppose I own Apple.com, okay? And I want to sell Apple.com to an end user in China, okay? So what I do is I just enter these keyword Apple. So I enter apple.cn and then see if there's any website developed. If there's a website developed, I just look at the website and see how serious that website is. You can look at the color, the design, you can tell roughly, right? Whether it's just a personal blog or really a serious business. And then I also use Google Translate to help. Google Translate is pretty good these days. And to translate, and you can understand the content. What I want to find out is the nature of the business, what kind of business they're running, and also the size. Most important is what is the size of the company? Can they afford to, buy a very expensive domain?
Right.
So you use Google Translate to figure out, can they really pay the price? Because I want someone who needs my domain and at the same time can afford to pay for the price, right? So after I do this research, if I want to know get an email contact, I use a browser add-on called Hunter to give me the email addresses available on the website. And so that's the basic approach that I use. So after I finish with .cn, I also use try apple.com.cn, and I repeat the process. And then the final approach is to use the Baidu. Just enter Apple into the Baidu search, and don't worry if you don't read Chinese, that's fine. All we need to do is to look at the search result and look at the URL part and see if there's any similar domains. Okay, if someone is using apple-llc.com, apple-group.com, then it may be a likely candidate. So I click the URL and repeat the same research. And so by doing so, you can get a group of likely candidates, and at the same time, you can also get the email address. And then you can just write a simple letter. If they have a need for an upgrade, then there's not much you need to say. If they need an apple.com, they just let them know that you have the apple.com. So that's what I would do.
Interesting. So, and kind of one of the points I want to go back to real quick here is, so you were saying how to size up a company. So how would I size up whether or not a Chinese company has the ability to pay, let's just say 6 figures for a domain?
I can look at the pictures, if they have a lot of factories and if they have a page listing a lot of their pictures of their top executives. If I see some 20 executives, that means it's not a very small company, right? And if they have a board of directors, you can tell, with help from Google Translate, you can actually get a rough idea of what kind of organization structure of the company.
Right.
And you can even look at the email address. If they're not using their company email, if they're using a QQ.com, it's likely a very small one-man band. So you can actually tell from just between the lines, you can tell how big the company is. So that's what I do with, I have actually researched a Russian website or, and a lot of German website, and I use the same approach. Just use Google Translation, Google Translate, look at the pictures, look at the pictures of the executives, and I can get a rough idea.
Interesting. Yeah, because I know for me, like last week or so, I received an inquiry that came in for the number 9, the letter Z.com. And I knew it was an inquiry, but it was written in Chinese characters. I didn't know what to do. And so it was interesting that you mentioned Google Translate, because that's the only thing that I knew to do was, hey, let's take this, copy, paste it into Google Translate. It detected which language it was. I think it was like Chinese Simplified or something like that, that it then translated into English to where I could then read it and go, oh, you're actually inquiring about what the price is for this. But then the other side was a matter of going in reverse to be able to say, so I was like, well, maybe I can write it in English, translate it back to the Chinese Simplified, copy that, paste it in. I mean, is that something that you suggest, or, is it like, hey, only do the Chinese part, or is it, should I do Chinese and English?
Well, actually, before that, I would actually just go to do the research first. Is it from a company, use the name and just go to Baidu search, go to the .cn, go to the .com.cn and see if there's already a website.
Right.
And then when I write a letter, I think I like simple message. When I do outbound, I mean, not often, I just write very simple sentence, because if there's a need for them, then there's not much you need to say.
Right.
You just let them know you have the domain, at the price.
And then they'll decide whether or not they find value in it to pay for it.
Yeah. So maybe it's a good idea to just use Google Translate, but you include the original text. So you have the English with the Chinese translation at the same time. But I think I would just make it very short. There's not much explanation I need to do.
Right.
Yeah.
So then, in other words, because another thing that I saw in this inquiry was that, and this is what kind of, made it real to me, was that the person actually signed using their WeChat name. And so it, that makes me kind of go, hey, is that a tool that many domain buyers will use? And then likewise, the other question to that is, or along with that is, domain users likely use WeChat in China, but then can non-Chinese users, so let's just say myself, for instance, do you recommend using WeChat to, conduct these type of transactions or find buyers?
Well, you can, because you can sign up and get a WeChat account. I mean, WeChat is like telephone in the West. Everyone has one. So it's actually a personal communication tool. So it's very, it's a good way to communicate.
Gotcha. So then what's the best place online, to learn about the buying and selling of domains in the Chinese market?
Well, actually, I haven't seen much, information available in English when it comes to, the Chinese domain market. I've been, I write on Domain Wire right now, trying to cover the Chinese domain market. And I also used to have a blog on NamePros that would explain a lot of stuff, like, how does Pinyin, and also the acronym things, like all the different detail that you can actually go to NamePros and do a
Right.
search. And the good thing is there's actually quite a number of Chinese domain investors on NamePro. So you
Oh,
can
really?
ask questions on NamePro. But otherwise, I'm actually quite surprised that there's not a lot of information available in English yet.
Right. So what's interesting to me, so like there is a site, well, but I mean, albeit it's in Chinese. What is it? 4.cn.
Yeah.
And so is that, I guess, is that like a domain registrar or marketplace, or what is that?
No, I haven't looked at it for a while. I think it's just a domain registrar as well as domain marketplace. They usually do quite a lot. They do the registration. They also do the buy and sell as well.
Gotcha. So I mean, so it at least kind of appears to me, although like I said, it's a bit rough because I don't know Chinese, so it's kind of hard. It'd be, I guess, a challenge to for one to list, for a non-Chinese user to actually list their domain there within that market. But like I said, I mean, I'm even looking at it right now, and it's like, this seems like the place to be if you were going to try to attempt to sell a given domain name into the Chinese market.
Oh, you mean how you want when we talk about how to sell to China?
Yeah, so like, well, when I sit here and I think and I go, man, well, what's the best way? Is it using Google Translate? I mean, obviously you can do that, but like I said, just uncovering 4.cn here, it makes me kind of think like, well, maybe that's the market, maybe that's the best marketplace, to kind of reach out to Chinese domain buyers.
But personally, I actually don't use. I do not actually sell specifically to China because I think I want to sell to the whole world, including China.
Correct.
So I do not actually specifically contact those marketplaces in China. But what I find out is there's actually a very easy way to do it. I mean, of course, if you have a domain that's worth 6 or 7 figures, you can actually talk to a domain broker in China, so they can help you connect with the end users. But like me, and also the majority of domain investors holding just average quality domains, my experience is there's a very simple way. I mean, just list your domains with a multi-listing service, such as Afternic, because Afternic has a very extensive retail network in the world, including China. I mean, in China alone, they have partners, all the leading domain registrars as partners, such as Alibaba Cloud, eName. And so what I also do is, I list your domains with, for example, Afternic.
Right.
And right away, your domains will be exposed to the Chinese Chinese potential buyers in the Chinese language environment, as well as using the Chinese payment method, right?
Really?
So that means you don't have to deal with the language issue. You don't have to deal with the payment issue. You just let the local retail outlet handle all this issue. You just set a bean price and then you wait. So I find there's a much simpler way, and that's what I do too.
So then what about like transferring the domain? How does that work out?
Well, with, for example, Afternic, if you set a bean price, then they will handle everything for you.
Got it. Got it.
So I think it just makes it much, much easier for domain investors to stay away from the language and the cultural problem, the payment problem. I think this probably will become the mainstream in the future. And that's what I've been using too, even though I speak Chinese.
Right.
Right.
So then what would you recommend? So obviously, because I go, see, again, you got a leg up on me, man. You can actually speak Chinese. I'm over here. Hey, I don't know which way up or down is, but to a certain extent, like I know that you mentioned brokers, that you could probably reach out to brokers if you didn't want to go the Afternic route. I mean, are there top brokers that hey, these are probably some good people to deal with if you have that top quality name, if you will?
There are a couple of domains brokers, involved in the Chinese buy and sell, but I better not single out anyone just to
Yeah.
avoid the
Well,
the confusion. But
and
if
I
you do a
think
search on like NamePro, you can go to NamePro and do a search. You probably with. I think they have a list of domain brokers, including those from China.
correct, and I think they do have a list of because I'm not scared of any of them. Honestly, I go, hey, the one that I do know is George Hong.
Hong, yes, yeah.
And so I know that he does, and then I believe also working with him is like Kate Lim.
Yes.
And then there's some others, but like you're right, like you can actually go out to NamePros, type in the request to go, hey, looking for a Chinese domain broker, or even probably start a thread, I would imagine, and somebody's going to respond.
Yes.
And so it's a okay. So that's an interesting case because I didn't realize Afternic has had that wide of a reach.
Yes, and it's good. It's very good for small investors like me.
Right.
Those brokers wouldn't be interested in handling my domain.
Interesting. And so, kind of wrapping up here. So, what would be your advice to someone looking to get into domain investing?
What I've learned is, to read. I mean, just what I've learned. It took me years and years to actually understand the domain game. I thought it's very easy, but it's not that easy. So read a lot of stuff. If you're interested in the Chinese domain market, read my articles. Go to NamePro, ask questions. I've learned a lot I started from NamePro, so NamePro is a good place to start. There's a lot of good people on NamePro. So, start from there, do a lot of reading first, But I mean, to be honest, a lot of people have to go through the first stage of buying all the garbages.
Oh, man.
Probably we couldn't avoid that part. But reading has helped me a lot.
He's like, read before you buy.
That's correct. Read, and before you buy.
Yeah, because if not, you will be buy, and you will leave this industry disgruntled and disillusioned just about, hey, they lied to me. I couldn't do quick flips. I couldn't make it from a rags to riches story. So, I definitely, I had my own bumps and bruises in terms of this industry of shelling out thousands of dollars since having recouped everything. But, when I look back, it's very much like you said, had I spent the time, a good probably 18 months just reading and not even reading and probably more so following along with auctions. And not necessarily spending money to do that, but just kind of following along on paper, making my selections, and then just kind of seeing how things turned out.
And you can also read, most important, apart from reading the success stories, it's also very important to read story of failures, like my failure and dotmobi, because that's how we learn. I learned from my failure. So I'm sure by reading failures of other people, you can understand what to avoid.
Totally.
Totally. Read.
Totally. So then last but not least, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners in terms of how to get in contact with you or where they might find you at?
Well, you can find me every day on LinkedIn, and that's my playground. So where I post all the small bits and pieces of news about China as well as other places in the world. And that's also the place where I engage with people in real conversation. So you're welcome to come to my LinkedIn page and we can just chat.
Well, superb. So with that, we're out of time. So Kassey, man, thank you again for joining us today and sharing your domain investing journey and insight about the Chinese domain market.
Oh, thank you, Alvin, sorry.
Certainly, no worries at all. Hey, man, most people either it's Alvin, Allen, or Alex. So I'm kind of like, hey, you get the first two letters right. It's okay.
Mine could be Kassey or Kassey or Kassey. Exactly. Nice talking to you, Alvin.
Yeah, thank you. And then also, listeners, thank you for tuning into Kickstart Commerce, where we share search marketing and domain name strategies to help grow your business. Please subscribe to this podcast via iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or Podbean. Last but not least, please visit kickstartcommerce.com to subscribe to the weekly newsletter sharing tips and tricks about the disciplines of digital strategy. Thanks, and that's all for now.